This is every build hack you need to try in Minecraft, whether it's your first day playing or you've been playing for 10,000.
By just simply placing a couple of candles on top of a bamboo stalk, you get a brand new flowering plant to have inside of your garden. And I mean, come on, there's 16 different dye colors to choose from, which is more variation than we're getting from literal flowers. And that's not the only thing that we can throw on top of our garden, since by placing some sea pickles on top of a pumpkin or a melon, we now have pumpkin and melon stems. Though here I wouldn't be as enthusiastic on doubling or tripling up like we do in the candles. I don't think pumpkins usually come with this many stalks. Building a staircase can quickly get complicated, and I don't think I'm personally going to learn how to do a spiral staircase anytime soon. But we can take our current staircase up a step by just simply rotating in this stair on the outside, so that when it creates that 90-degree angle, we give the illusion of a banister. And hey, it'll even be harder to fall off of the stairs this way. Not impossible, and I wouldn't recommend trying it to prove me wrong, but it looks so much cleaner for something that really took no effort to do. We were placing the stairs anyway, now we just do it at an angle. Simple as that. Waterlogged leaves are great. For one, they're able to replace obsidian in your blast chambers, and now if you put them on a fence post, they're able to replace your actual globe, which I think is awesome. And while it is a little inconsistent, being more like 70% land than 70% water, if you ask me, that's nitpicking. Maybe it's more supposed to represent the Minecraft globe than our globe. And after all, it's not round, so I think it makes sense. With just 2 dripstone spikes, we're able to make a very convincing palm tree to put in your world. First, we're going to take this lower spike and bring it up to full height, and then go up a block, place your leaves, and then have another spike coming down. That way, with just a stalactite and a stalagmite, we've made a perfect angled tree trunk for your builds. And what I love about this so much is that most plants in the game do work on this kind of 2D texture crosshatch. And the way that the dripstone spike is, it works the same, making it fit surprisingly well for something that was never meant to be seen above ground. By just using a polished diorite slab with a spruce trapdoor on top, we've got all that we need to put together a minimalist toilet to put inside of your modern restroom. Since by then adding in a stone button with an item frame and a quartz slab in that item frame, then we got ourselves a roll of TP as well. And for another simple bathroom build, simply put 6 stairs facing each other like this, and then use those same spruce trapdoors over top to give yourselves a large hot tub. Or maybe it's a larger toilet. Now, when you're looking at the stems that you find inside of the warped forest, you're probably not thinking they look particularly comfortable. But as Blockception proves, by just putting 6 of these together inside of your bed, then it makes for a great looking design for your sheets. Add in some quartz slabs to line up the outside, and then snow layers for your pillow up top, and we got ourselves a pretty convincing bed. Albeit one that you can't sleep on, but form and function aren't often the same thing, are they? Stop placing lanterns on your roof, or rather, stop only placing lanterns from your roof. Since just this simple hack, we're able to make it look 10 times better. By simply adding in an item frame and a block of your choice, then it's integrated so much better into your build. Though I'd be remiss showing off the original post and not making a joke about having a diamond block as a support for your soul lantern, but the comments beat me to it already, so if you don't have the space for a chandelier but you still want to show off, maybe this is how you do it. Walking on campfires probably doesn't sound comfortable. Probably sounds like a fire hazard more than anything. But if we were to put these out first using a shovel or a water bucket, then when aligned like so, we can get a pretty great looking bridge to put over your gaps. And literally just by adding a few of these over top of a ravine or a river, you don't have to spend a lot of materials to make it look really good. And if you bring a flint and steel, you can also make your lunch there too. Just make sure not to ignite the other wooden parts of this bridge, and you'll be fine. Trapdoors have a lot of different colors, and with that, we're able to make ourselves a multicolored Easter basket. Simply place down our trapdoors, flip up these ones, and then add a chain in the middle, and at that point, we can add in our turtle eggs into the center, and we've got ourselves a little bit of an Easter basket for when the season comes around. And as long as we don't build these over sand, the turtles will never hatch, and we won't have to worry about them coming to the realization that they were tucked into somebody's tradition. I imagine that'd be a little traumatic. With the help of copper lightning rods, we can tilt them upside down like this to be the supports for our park bench. And then using whatever kind of trapdoor you choose underneath and behind it, we just connect it to some fences like this, and we got ourselves a nice place to sit while we're outside. And then my personal favorite touch for something like this is by putting a little bit of pathland in front of where you're actually going to step in front of it. That way, it looks like the floor's been stepped down by everyone getting on and off of this. It's a small touch, but it really goes the distance. You've probably never thought of using looms for your floor. I mean, you've probably also never thought of placing down more than one loom since you only need one to make banners, but after seeing this, I think you'll reconsider. Since by angling our looms in towards the sidewalk, we can place these when surrounded by stone slabs like this to make a very convincing sewer drain for our sidewalks. doors. And then if you want to add in even more detail, add on some iron trapdoors on top, and now we're able to peek through the top trapdoor texture and see the grate of the gutter, which, much like its name, I think looks pretty great. Having your nether portal out in the open is definitely something that only noobs do. But as this user Feeky and Beaky shows off, the solution to having your nether portal out in the open is just by putting more around it. And now, by the help of the mangrove trapdoors, we're able to quickly make these into torii gates that look beautiful in your world. I mean, especially in the plains biome, the reds of the mangrove really pop nicely. But I think especially because this leads you into the nether, it fits really well. With just a pot and a lightning rod, we're able to put these together and not only make a lightning hazard, but also make ourselves a pretty convincing butter churn. And I just love how the top of the lightning rod disappears inside of the pot texture. It's a simple idea, and it's just as simple to set up. Plus, it looks great. I don't know what else you could want. This idea by user Cactus Sand might just be one of my favorites, since by placing 4 spruce trap doors like this and then flipping them all up towards the center block, that already gives us a makeshift barrel. And then by filling that up with a flowering azalea bush with a big drip leaf plant on top, we can place one more spruce trap door on top of this whole mess, and it looks as if we've had a plant that's overgrown so much that it started to lift up the lid of the barrel. I mean, it also kind of looks like Oscar the Grouch too, which I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a fan of. I think whether you build this on Sesame Street or whether you build this next to your next garden, it could fit in very nicely. Usually when we put redstone blocks in our build, it's because we want to use them for redstone. But in this case, we're using 2 different redstone things to just make it look as if there's another machine going on. See, by having an observer facing like this, we can put an end rod right on top of the redstone output, and then connect that over to this box here, which when we add on our stone button, makes it look as if we have a gearbox just out in the open. And so if you don't have the create mod inside of your world, this is a pretty good way to spoof it. In Minecraft, we have big mushrooms, small mushrooms, but no medium-sized mushrooms. Since, as you can see in this Reddit post, by just mixing together a diorite wall with a granite slab on top, we're able to make a pretty convincing brown mushroom to have in your world. And then, because we're the ones who choose the blocks, we can really scale this to whatever size we want. And just by looking at this example picture here on their post, I think this is begging for a parkour course. So if you decided to set up shop in a mushroom fields biome for all the other benefits of that biome, this could be a way to build something there that actually looks like it's supposed to be there, instead of just being a cut and paste from something in the other part of the overworld. This is the nether portal, and this is the nether portal's sun, or it sure looks that way, since by just adding in 4 black stone stairs in front of the nether portal, we can make it look as if we've got a teeny tiny little nether portal put in your world. And you know it's cute when you have to talk in a different voice about it. Anyway, what I love about this is that it's still technically functional too. If you had a trapdoor that could get you into crawling mode, then you could still crawl through this and end up on the other side. We're just not gonna have the same luxury going back. I mean, after all, you can't start crawling when you're in the actual nether portal, but for something off in the distance, I think this is pretty cute. And it also means we're not gonna have to deal with anything else coming out of the portal, which I'll gladly take as well. Now in the past, we've shown off ways to make dead trees inside of the nether. However, here, I think Dreadnought has a great idea to add this dead tree next to your builds and still have it be functional. Since by using polished basalt in the right directions, we're able to make it look as if a tree was struck by lightning. Add in a few leaves for some extra details, and then the key part is adding in a lightning rod right in the center. That way, this tree is actually going to be functional as a lightning rod, keeping all of your wooden builds safe, and also giving its story as to why it burned down in the first place. I love this. Banners are 2 blocks tall, but they don't have the collision box to something like a door, meaning that if we place a banner down here in the floor, we can have the top part of that banner crop up into something like a stair block here. So then when we angle the stairs just right, it looks as if we have cushions placed on top of your sofa. With 16 dies to choose from, plus with other banner patterns you want to add in, there's a lot of variety. It can get pretty fun. Now unfortunately, we're not able to plant anything inside of the big decorated pots themselves. However, by putting a smaller flower pot on top of one, then it blends in pretty nicely with the other brick texture, which means we can then add in our 2 block tall plants. Add in a small azalea bush into the small flower pot, and then a big azalea bush on top, and we get this beautiful looking 2-tiered plant. And that's not the only one we have to choose from. The way that this Reddit user set it up, we've got a whole bunch of different options, using bamboo, sea pickles, even a large fern if you want to, giving a really unique plant to have inside of your builds. I mean, it definitely doesn't grow like this in the rest of Minecraft, but it looks good enough that you wouldn't even notice that without a closer look. In the past, we've talked about how to make ceiling fans in Minecraft, but what about a fan that you have placed on the floor? All we have to do is place down an armor stand, and then add in an iron trapdoor in front of it like this. And here's a rare occurrence where I'm actually glad that we don't have the arms on armor stands in Java, since that gives us the perfect opportunity to make this fan here. And while you could get fancy and add in armor stand feathers for extra detail like this user did here, I think that's making it a little too complex for something that, if you put it next to a desk, already looks perfectly fine to me. Lighting up your base is clearly important, but lighting up your base and still having your base look good is also very important. And so I think this idea of having this lush cavern design and then going into the floor, placing down a sea lantern and azalea leaf, and then here's the key part, waterlogging that azalea leaf, gives us a way for the blue of the sea lantern to blend in without sticking out against the rest of the green of our floors. And to see how well this lights up, later in this person's video, they go through and break all the glow berries and you see it fully illuminated still, making it subtle and effective. You can't get much better than that. With an item frame and a hanging sign, we can tuck the sign item inside to make it look like an even smaller sign placed on your build. And then, as user Trailer Octopus points out, if you were to name the sign, then you could even have it have text when you hover over it. While their example is using exclusively visible item frames, I think this could look perfectly fine using regular item frames too, making it good for those of us in creative and survival. It's easy for shulker boxes to look out of place. Most of the time, we're just placing them down temporarily before we break them to pick up the rest of our building supplies. But here's a way to add them into your build and have them feel like something that you actually want to leave there. Since, as shown off here, if we just angle our shulker boxes against the wall like this, then we can frame them just right to look like actual shelving units inside of your world, which I think is just adorable. It kind of reminds me of the cubby system that we used to have to use back in grade school. And plus, there's so many different dyed colors to choose from that you can make this look good in any build that you want. Even dye it brown and have it blend in better with our actual wooden boxes and barrels. Now first, we're going to place down a banner, and then by adding a hanging sign into the top block the same as the banner, you'll notice that the stick of the banner now works very well as the stick underneath this hanging sign. Granted, it's not exactly cheap, because hanging signs aren't exactly cheap, but it wants to get a couple of signs to use. And seeing how good this looks, I would implore you to do just that. And just as we did with our sofas earlier, if we were to add our banners in with a stair that's just facing forward and a couple of trapdoors flipped up for the arms, then we've got a throw pillow put on top of our little chair. Or really, even just the chair by itself looks plenty good anyway. But if you want some cushion, then there's that option too. Or if you want an even simpler chair to build, then this one takes a page right out of IKEA's book. The bamboo texture of the scaffolding links up particularly well with the bamboo texture of our trapdoor. So place the trapdoor on top of the scaffolding, flip it up, and we've got ourselves an IKEA-styled chair. It's a good thing how simple this is to build, because looking at the price for this chair, I'd much rather just build myself a bamboo farm and get that covered. I think the only ones that'd be willing to pay $46 for this chair is a panda that's looking for a nice meal. Usually, you wouldn't leave your fence gate open like this. It's just an excuse to let your animals all file out. But if we follow as this example does here, we actually see that flipping them open in such a way looks particularly good for a wheelbarrow design. And then by attaching a hopper and a wheelbarrow facing into each other, and have a perfect wheelbarrow to have outside of your farm. Or really, anywhere. I mean, I maybe wouldn't put this on a city street, but think of it, you can fill up the hopper with different kinds of items. So if you really wanted to, go fill this up with flowers and seeds, and it fits pretty great next to your garden. And as someone who's always hated the idea of just having barrels lying around next to my farms, this is a good way to have storage, yet also have it fit in with the build. I'm not gonna say deciding to live in the hills is a bad choice, I'm just gonna say you're gonna have to build a lot of stairs. Or you would if you didn't look at this design. Since with the help of a slime block and a sticky piston, we're able to make a pretty simple redstone contraption that can take us up to that second level of your base. And it ultimately takes up less space than having to do a staircase. Granted, there's a lot more room for user error, but if you have everyone who visits your base sign a waiver, you should be fine. Now, when we talk about adding atmosphere to your builds, that's usually through, well, the builds. But I also think that sound effects are a really great way that game designers have known forever to add a really cool aesthetic into your builds. And that's why I love this idea by I'm Tyler James. Since they put here, if you were to put a villager on top of amethyst, then all of that villager's footsteps are going to trigger the amethyst chime. And now your room doesn't just look like this, but it also sounds like this. And I think combining this like they did here with the crying obsidian is a really great touch. That way we get particles, sound effects, and a nice looking build. Anvils don't float in place for very long. I mean, how else could you get squished by an anvil? But then, how is this working? Well, the reason for this is actually pretty clever. Since by hiding a string underneath the anvil, the string's able to be free supporting, and now we can use this anvil with a couple of chains on top as a survival-friendly anchor detail. And as far as placing the string, just put it on top of a block, and then after you break that block, that string's still gonna be there. Simple setup with a great payoff.
What looks different between these two logs? Well, even if you can't put your finger on it from this angle, you might feel that this one is a bit more realistic. So, how does it work? Well, by placing an item frame on the top like so, we get a sneaky bit of detail to our tree trunks. And with this, we might be able to get away with leaving a few more trees chopped down like so in the forest. And hey, it looks better than yet another barren forest biome, so it might be worth trying. When you're in a hot climate like the desert or the Badlands biome, oak leaves really change their color, but that'll let us make them into tumbleweeds instead, since if you were to just tuck a couple of these onto the ground, they do match pretty nicely with the dead bushes that we already got. And then you could use something like birch leaves or azalea leaves to match the actual texture that you're going for, giving you all the plants that you wanted, dead or alive. Despite how it is in game, not every tree has a trunk this size, but since Minecraft's blocks are one size fits all, we'll have to get creative. And for that, walls actually work quite well. Using diorite walls for birch and andesite for acacia, we can make our own skinny trees to use in your world. And while the illusion might break if people get too close, this could do the trick for some landscaping at a distance. If we were to tuck this birch trapdoor into the corner, then you'll notice that the white inside of the texture makes it into a pretty great bed for your dog or your cat. And at that point, just add in an item frame with some food nearby, and I think this will make for the perfect spot for your pet pal to hang out. It's tough to make Minecraft feel scary. I mean, this is what the world looks like. What would you expect? But to add that vicious flair to your nether base, these nether wart blocks can really sell the image. Taken after this user, we use the block for something of a blood canal to fill out our altar room. And if anything, it lets us finally have a use for nether wart blocks since we can't uncraft them into nether wart. And when they're this easy to come by in a crimson forest, I think that's a win-win. Cobwebs are annoying, but here they're essential. Because with just a trapdoor and a backboard, we have all we need to make ourselves a simple basketball hoop. And if you want, you can even pick up a piece of orange concrete and throw it through, and it'll fall right through the cobweb. Nothing but net. Windows can really help to flesh out a build. But what if the standard glass windows don't fit your aesthetic? Well, then these trapdoors might be the better solution. By mixing the orientations, we can essentially open and close our shutters depending on what we want. We added a vertical slab to Minecraft. Well, kind of. Because funnily enough, if you just place two trapdoors facing into each other and then flip them up, then it certainly looks like we've got ourselves a vertical slab here. And especially when you use something like the spruce trapdoor, the texture blends together perfectly and makes it look like an actual feature in the game. Which I guess it is, but just not in the way that Mojang intended it. And considering that they denied putting this feature in the game, this is really the closest we're gonna get. You never want your house to feel too cramped. So to make every block count, why not opt for trapdoors instead of blocks for your walls? Now, hear me out. The idea here is actually pretty solid, because while the regular blocks fill up the space, trapdoors take up just a fraction, which makes for a roomy inside without sacrificing the exterior. And as long as no hooligans come by and flip open the trapdoors, your base should be just as safe as it was before. In case you didn't know, we're fully capable of using Unicode and special characters on a Minecraft sign. And while that does allow us to type an arrow like this instead of this, it also opens up this neat little detail. See, by putting this black square along the corners of the sign, we can make it look like it's nailed down to the wall. It's a simple detail, but it's also simple to do, which I'd say makes it worth your time. Here's how to make a pool table. Since we're able to overlap carpet with signs, all we need to do is add green carpet to lay over an oak and spruce sign, and that'll make it look like a pool cue when you look at it from the top of the field, which I've got to say is much better than this old design of using grass blocks and signs around the edges. Fish tanks make a great conversation starter to have in your base, but not everyone could justify building one that big. So if you're looking for more of a fishbowl than a fish tank, then this might be the trick. See, if you rest a minecart on top of a waterlogged set of sea pickles, then any fish inside will stay hydrated, giving us a much smaller footprint and a new roommate for the house. If we fill in the gaps of our wall with the brick wall block, then those brick walls make it look as if the wall got damaged and the facade's starting to fade off, which I think is a great touch. Not only does it add literal depth to the build, but it also adds depth in that it tells more of a story with it, which is a lot to accomplish from just a couple of bricks on a wall, so I think this is a pretty good deal. While Minecraft signs allow you to use emojis and Unicode characters, those don't exactly have detail. So to spice up your signage at the next shop, why not mix together item frames and signs to do the trick? Since these can overlap, we can both denote and show the item in question. And I've gotta say, that adds a nice bit of clarity to your next potion shop. And from there, it's up to you to choose what to sell. By taking brick stairs and alternating them in a pattern like so, we have it in just a way where it looks like there's a brick missing from each of these steps. And I think that's just perfect. And not only is this a little funny thing to put in your world, but when mixed into a wall like this example, it actually adds some convincing depth. And when you zoom out, it might even leave some people wondering how you actually built it, which I think is true of all the great build hacks. Fences and walls are commonplace in any Minecraft build you visit, and while they're nice enough blocks to use, I think we need to do better. But luckily on Bedrock, that solution is super simple. Over here, it's possible to put different buttons on top of the posts. And while we can't do the same on Java, a bonus tip for there is that by adding string on top of walls, we can make them into columns when we choose to. Scaffolding is a great block, but it doesn't look much like actual scaffolding. So instead Instead, we're gonna use campfires, since when we extinguish our campfires and then add in ladders and trapdoors like this, it'll still be functional as scaffolding, but look a lot more believable to the actual thing. And at this point, this is the kind of scaffolding that you wouldn't mind leaving up after you finish the build. It looks that good. Having a furnace is a necessary evil for your survival base, but just because we need to have one doesn't mean we need to be boring about how we place it. And that's why something like this fireplace is the perfect solution. That way the block isn't left out in the open, but we can still right-click the floor and use it just the same. Building over water can be a real hassle. After all, since the liquid lacks a hitbox, it's not exactly easy to build in the ocean, and most of the time we have to start with a pillar from the lake bed to even place one block. But thankfully, we have lily pads for a better alternative, and using these, we can start from the surface instead of diving deep, and that alone can save us a bunch of time on any and all future pirate builds. Look at how much of a difference we have between this leaf block and this one here, and the only thing that we added in to make that was a couple of vines like so. And to me, it's so amazing how far we can go with such a simple design. Though I must mention that if you plan on adding this, you might want to invest in some string as well. That way you can limit how far the vines actually grow and make sure that your new plant doesn't get out of hand. Building a custom tree instead of a bone meal one is a quick way to improve your build. But when it comes to adding branches on that tree, it's a bit tougher. So when the standard logs are a bit too big to use, then fences might be the next best solution. Mixing in these as well as a combination of stairs and slabs can add a ton of detail and keep your scale on the smaller side.
Minecraft's pots can be great for decorating, and no small part of that is the fact that we're able to place anything on top of it and it can overlap with the lip of the jar. Look no further than the lanterns example here. By placing either a soul or regular lantern on top, it'll fit perfectly because of the hitbox, giving you a new way to light up your base.
When you think of using signs in building, you're probably picturing something like this. But folks, that's only scratching the surface. And it turns out that even without text, these could be an invaluable resource to add. For instance, look at these columns. What would have been simple stacks of blocks becomes something much more upscale when we add signs for detail. And I think when you're able to use something as cheap as a sign to level up your build, it's a no-brainer to add. Here's how to make your table look expensive without actually spending that much. Since with just 4 stairs facing into each other like this, we can line the top with trapdoors, and there you go. We have a perfect table design without having to do any kind of complicated building. And from there, if you scatter around a few chairs, this will already be perfect enough to put on display. Though personally, I'd rather use birch trapdoors instead of the oak ones that this user did, since those will blend better with the sandstone that we're using anyway. One of the inescapable truths in Minecraft is that grass is a very different color map depending on the biome. Meaning, if you place a green grass block from your inventory inside of a desert, all you're gonna see is yellow. And that's unfortunate. Or it was, until the Caves and Cliffs update. Now, with the help of the moss blocks and azalea leaves, we can get green lush colors wherever we'd like. And that'll definitely help your oasis to actually look like an oasis. Whenever you build a farm, you're bound to have these little patches of water that are hanging around. And unfortunately, those break up the farmland texture. But instead, if we use dark oak slabs like this, we can waterlog them to hide that water, yet still hydrate all the crops around. And then, if you're looking for something even more to do with that slab, you could add on a scarecrow like this with a jack-o'-lantern face. Now you got yourself a light source as well, which will solve 2 problems with one solution. Minecraft offers plenty of variety for its different carpets, but that's all for color, not so much for detail. So that's our cue to think of something new. And while we could get crazy and use map art for detailed rugs, luckily there's a simpler solution with our signs. Since these can overlap with the carpets, we can use our own sign patterns to make different designs in the flooring. And whether you use these for your roads or your rugs, they both can definitely level up a build. From here, this just looks like a smoker, but as soon as we add a lever on top, then it starts to look like an old television set. And granted, we might have to do with this user's suggest and squint really hard to see it, but I think for a set piece in an old living room, this can definitely do the trick. While Minecraft allows for logs and wood blocks to have different orientations, the planks are a different story. Though, to offset that pain, we could just turn to a different path entirely. Sure enough, the next time that you go to build a dark oak wall, maybe add some cartography tables for detail. As you can see, these have a vertical texture compared to the standard horizontal. So until rotated planks become a base feature, this might be your best bet. Normally we do our cooking in a furnace, but how about a pot? Since, as we'll see here, by just putting a cauldron full of water on top of a campfire, the smoke's still able to pass through the top. And then with a couple of fence gates pointing into it, and some armor stands locked into place like so, this looks like the perfect place to cook up your meal. And what's even better about it is that we can still interact with the campfire underneath. So if you really wanted to, just place down your meat, and you'll still get the food cooked all the same, just with a lot more visual splendor. By this point, we're all plenty familiar with the grass block texture, which means using this in a build can often feel tired, or at the very least, underwhelming. But fortunately, we've got some blocks in recent years to help break up that monotony. Like, why not add a strip of moss to the green in your yard to make it look mowed? Or even just mixing in some green concrete powder here and there can help to texture those paths we've seen hundreds of times before. For the building community, the advent of glow ink sacks is a pretty big game changer. And while the glow squid itself has been talked about to death, its drop might actually give you some neat opportunities. For instance, with the ability to make text on signs glow in the dark, we could tuck some of these in a dark dark cave and add in some creepy, atmospheric eyes in the darkness. And as long as your visitors don't step too close, this illusion should more than hold up. Sometimes, while building in Minecraft, the grid system might be a frustration. And while command blocks do give us a workaround, there actually is a way to do this in survival. See, the way that stairs connect, if you place a ring of them like so, then the center connects in the middle of the blocks. Do the same with another on top, and you too can make a pillar in your house that's visibly off the grid.
Minecraft recently got a whole bunch of new paintings to play around with. And while a lot of those look great by themselves, it'll be taken after this user's advice that we can spice them up a bit. Since here with just a couple of stairs facing in different directions, they were able to make a perfect painting frame for the new painting. And considering a lot of the paintings are also really big, I think this does a great job of showing them off at scale. I mean, with this one that we have in this example, it almost looks like a window. And if you really wanted to, you could also make this into a secret entrance like we've shown off in the past. Really, plenty of possibilities for a pretty simple build hack.
This might not look like a hot tub, but just wait. Since it's possible for campfires to emit smoke through a 1-block thick floor, we can place them underneath this and use the smokestack to stand into steam from the water. And the good news is that if you get too close to the heat of the campfires underneath, the water up top can still cool you off if you catch a blaze. With just a wooden shovel, we're gonna make your door look 10 times more realistic. Since by changing the grass that's underneath the door to a grass path, now it'll finally have that small gap underneath that'll make it look like a real door. Because at least in real life, if there's no gap underneath the door, it's not opening that much. So this will fix our ones in Minecraft, all while being insanely simple to do as well. Sometimes it's the textures you least expect that work out the best, and I think there's something kind of beautiful about that. Like if you were gonna build out your wooden floor, you'd probably never think to use beehives. But it turns out these buzzing blocks can work surprisingly well for a tile pattern. Clearly, a little detail goes a long way. So while it would be nice to add a potted plant to your Minecraft house, why stop there? Instead, we could add something like vines to the outside of the leaves, give it some much needed depth to the vegetation. So if you're not already playing with something like Vanilla Tweak's Bushy Leaves add-on, this might be a good alternative.
Now, when you first see this pattern, it might be hard to decipher what's all going on. But really, by just placing one piston in the center, pistons facing into it on these sides, and then intertwining a bunch of that repeating flower pattern together, we can follow this example and get some really nice looking piston floors. And honestly, I'm amazed with how well the borders line up on the piston face like this. It kinda hurts your head to stare at for too long, but it's hard to say it's not cool on a floor.
Stop building your chimneys like this, but instead, do them like this. Since by adding in just a wall and a stone pressure plate, the smoke can still pass through the top, and it'll make the campfire design look a lot more realistic. Did you ever notice that the spruce door and the spruce trap doors look eerily similar? Well, using that, we can place 2 trap doors on the floor and make the illusion of a torn down or damaged front door. And funnily enough, this should actually keep out adult zombies better than the actual door anyway. No animals were harmed in the making of this hack, but it sure looks like they were. Because even though there's no moose that are in Minecraft, by using just a simple stair and some closed fence gates, we can make it look as if we mounted the mob's head right on top of our wall. And that way, we'll be able to take after Gaston and start to use antlers in all your decorating. Every now and then, a simple trick is all you need. So while I'm sure your harbor already looks great, wouldn't it look just that little bit better if you switched the sunken oak logs for dark oak instead? That way, the darker texture would make the logs look water-worn and wet, adding that little bit of character to your build. Infinite water sources are helpful, but ugly. But this should do the job well enough. It's a well. I don't know if that was clear. And here, it looks like just one block of water, but when you pull from the inside, it'll refill from the water sources that we hit on the stairs from the side, letting it look minimalistic without minimizing the function. When you're overlaying blocks in a build, you've not only got to consider the texture on top, but also the background. Let me explain with this scenario. Say you've got a set of vines climbing along the stone wall. It looks fine, but if we add some copper ore to the backdrop, then it gives off the illusion of flowers on the vines. And it's the little things like this that definitely help to show that you're considering all parts of the build.
As I talked about in previous facts videos, water's able to hydrate crops even if it's just passing through air. So we can use that subtle hydration to be able to make these kind of designs like so, where our farmlands place the trapdoors lining it, and then we hide the water source under something like this with a moss carpet over top. And then we don't have to worry about dropping our crops into water, or dropping ourselves if we happen to step too close to the canal.
Sometimes it pays to have a different perspective. So while a block might look one way while it's facing you, if you flip it around, it might just be used in an entirely different way. So sure, you could use a lectern as just that, but if you rotate it around 180 degrees, then it makes for a fancy banister to use on your staircase. If you mix in a couple of upside down barrels into your floor, then you'll notice that we get quite the pattern to spice up your spruce texture. Oh, and not to mention the fact that you'll be able to fill up all of them with some hidden storage space, which I guess gives us a literal way of tucking our money in between the floorboards. A nice touch for sure. Clearly, it's tough to build anything realistic in Minecraft, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try where we can. So for a start, let's take these hillsides and transform them into a classic grassy hill. See, since there's only grass on the top texture of our grass blocks, then a simple solution would be to take some moss and place it around the dirt parts of the hill like so. And that way, the distracting dark brown dirt gets replaced with a more complementary went in green. And while it's probably still too boxy to look realistic up close, if you zoom out, it's a marked improvement for sure, and it'll be worth trying at your next hillside cottage. Now, you probably don't want to sit on a campfire, but extinguish it and add some signs like so, and now we've got ourselves a bench that's worth trying. Make this tiny bird bath, because for as cute as this looks, it's actually just as simple to build. All we need to do is waterlog a slab, then add in 4 signs to both block the water and add a lip to the bath bowl. And just like that, we've got the perfect spot for your parrots to hang out and chill. Literally. Take a look at these walls. Now, from afar, nothing looks too out of the ordinary, but up close, you'll notice that we actually did the unthinkable. We used walls as walls. And honestly, I'm amazed it isn't more popular to do this. You get more space for your interior, and it's cheaper than just using full regular blocks, both of which make this worth a try in your next base. Beds are a staple of the game, and they won't be going away anytime soon, though a little variety would be nice. So, what about a sleeping bag? Well, we can pull this off by solely placing slabs around the rim of the bed, which is super easy, and it doesn't require a lot of material. And while I'm not saying that this is going to work out if you place it in a castle, it might fit in for a temporary base in the mines. But for any Bedrock players, beware, because you might not be able to respawn on top of the bed like we can in Java.
Now, in theory, using drip leaf as a desk would be a pretty lousy concept, but taking a look at this, I'm reconsidering. By just putting a slab with a sign in front of it, then we've got a simple stool in front of our simple desk. Add a flower pot on top, it looks pretty nice. And if you don't want it to fall over, just power it with redstone, and that drip leaf's never gonna crash. Pretty cool.
When it's laid out like so, these trapdoors don't look like much, but as soon as we flip them up, you'll notice that this user gave us the design for some pretty neat trapdoor boxes to have in your base. And what I love most about these is that they don't all look the same, giving you some realistic variety to how the boxes play out. It's just learning that pattern's gonna be tough, but if you look at it with these birch trapdoors, it becomes a lot more obvious what to do. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?